Several major countries are now officially recognizing Palestine as a state. The United Kingdom, Canada, Portugal, and Australia all made official announcements recognizing Palestine on Sunday. And France joined them on Monday. Now, UK Prime Minister Kier Starmer had this to say on the announcement.
We must redouble our efforts to combat hatred in all its forms. We must channel our efforts, united together in hope, behind the peaceful future that we want to see. The release of the hostages, an end to the violence, an end to the suffering, and a shift back towards a two-state solution as the best hope for peace and security for all sides.
Along with the announcement, the UK government updated its map of the area to include a section labeled Palestine rather than occupied Palestinian territories. Political commentator Piers Morgan called it a historic moment in this 76-year conflict, but right-wing activist Tommy Robinson slammed Kier Starmer for the decision, writing, "Starmer just bent the knee for the Muslim vote in the most horrific way. Innocent Israelis were slaughtered en masse by barbaric Islamists, and this vile creature just brought shame on our nation by rewarding them."
This news comes as the United Nations is meeting in New York for its annual General Assembly this week, where President Trump is expected to meet with several leaders from the Middle East. As one of Israel's main allies, the U.S. has opposed the recognition of Palestine.
Palestine being recognized. Look, I oppose the butchery of the Palestinian people that Israel is engaged in, and as an abstract position, I support a two-state solution. I think that there should be a Palestinian state. However, I don't really like this language, like that they deserve a state. Like they don't deserve the state they would have, because the state they would have is under the rule of Hamas. Hamas does not have a right to exist or govern a country. Hamas is a rapacious terrorist organization that attacked its neighbor. And so if the state that is going to exist is one run by Hamas, there's no obligation to recognize it as legitimate, in the same way that the people of Japan have a right to a state, but they didn't have a right to the imperial state of Japan after it attacked the U.S. We went there and we removed that state, and then they got a different one. So as long as Hamas is going to be their political leadership, I am a little skeptical of this notion. I think the still awful but more moderate people on the other part of the Palestine I'm not coming up with it right now, the West Bank.
Okay.
Maybe that's a solution, but it's more complicated just saying, oh, they should deserve a state. Well, states don't have rights. Hamas doesn't have the right to exist. The Palestinians should have their own country and self-governance, but we don't. The Germans held self-governance, and then we took that away from them because they were the Nazis. So,
well, I think we have an agreement of trying to be, or on both sides of the aisle, trying to step out of foreign affairs. And so we cannot go and be everywhere monitoring everybody.
Yeah, I don't want to be
anywhere. Kind of like why we pulled out of Afghanistan and we see the Taliban is in full effect, and how much of a disaster that was after years and several people dying in a war that we joined into. Right. And so you and I talk about that a lot. And so it has to kind of be this notion of like, if most Americans do not want to continue down this path, and most Americans see that this war is not beneficial for us to continue funding at the very least, forget about which moral side of the aisle you're on, then we don't have any business saying what should exist and what not. It's just like we are out of it. But I think when you have Benjamin Netanyahu kind of doing whatever he would like to respond to this, and some people in the UN committing him saying that he has committed war crimes, well, then you have an issue where, even the families of the hostages are asking for Netanyahu to please scale back on some of what he's doing. So you're having several countries across the world say, we're coming together not to make any firm decisions for everyone, but to tell you guys that we are not going to endlessly keep supporting Israel. We're going to put some boundaries around this and say that with coerced action, Benjamin Netanyahu has to come to the table and tell us what an ending to this looks like. And I think that is a legitimate next step as opposed to just standing by, which we both agree, and just continuously funding whatever. There has to be some parameters around how and when we will support whatever's happening if we're going to continue to support and pay for it. And so to me, that's the biggest issue by saying maybe a two-state solution, because there has been aggravation for decades, well beyond our lifetime, about what should exist there. And so either we're going to be in it or out of it, but we cannot just say Netanyahu's able to do whatever he likes whenever he likes.
We should be out of it, period. I agree with that. No argument there. We should just be out of it. But Israel is committed to the conflict against Hamas, and they'll pursue it, I think, regardless. I don't know. There's different opinions
Without funding,
on whether...
you can't continue to...
Well, they could still buy weapons from us. They just have to pay more money. And, you know, I wish that Hamas would show some indication that it would like to cease to be a radical group, and then maybe we could work with them more closely. For instance, the new president of Syria, who is ex-Al-Qaeda, ex-ISIS, insane, but he wants Western engagement. He met Trump, shook his hand. He was doing an event with David Petraeus that I saw remarks from, talking about wanting to move past war and have dialogue. He wants Western engagement. So even people who are part of vile, evil organizations, they can go the other way, and that should be good. As Tywin Lannister says in Game of Thrones, when your enemies defy you, you meet them with steel and with fire, but when they want to come back into the fold, you welcome them, or else no one will ever surrender. But Hamas gives no indication that it wants to do that.
Well, that's not true, because they were just in Qatar trying to negotiate an end to this thing or some type of deal.
Oh, yeah, we'll give you half
and then
the
they got...
No, we're sick of hearing half the
Yeah,
hostages.
but then they
all
got...
the hostages,
Okay, but
please.
even if we get from half to all, if you're blowing up the place, as Netanyahu was doing, trying to kill people in the middle of them trying to negotiate, then what end result would you actually like here? You can't think that a neutral safe ground like Qatar, which was joining the U.S. and trying to negotiate this thing, should be a place where you should also attack. And that recently just happened. So if there are no rules whatsoever, then even if we agree or don't agree with anything that's happening over there, it's the fact that if there's no parameters to settling this...
is also being unreasonable.
That's how are we supposed to settle it?
Israel's government is being unreasonable. The Netanyahu regime seems perfectly happy to let everyone in the Gaza Strip die, or kill them directly or indirectly. They're going to kill people who are negotiating in Qatar. So they're not really acting in good faith. Neither side is acting in good faith, and so I just don't want to be involved, which is the attitude of most of the American people, as best I can tell. Certainly the attitude of most young Republicans. It's the attitude of everyone on the left. It would be a great bipartisan push to be like, you know what? If they want to work this out and they want our help, we could step in. But if neither side really wants to work this out, they want to kill each other, and that's very sad for the people of Palestine. I wish it was some other way. Maybe we can get them aid, but otherwise we should butt out.
And it seems like out of all the conversations that President Trump has had about being this great negotiator and great communicator, which we see when we talk about Russia, or we see when we're talking about the conflict there, and we see we're talking about the conflict here, it's like, well, get people in the room and have a conversation with European leaders and some of our allies about what a real solution looks like. None of this should be one person's choice, right? This all affects everybody, because everybody's helping putting Egypt. We can talk to everybody properly, but if you all have that indication that you are different and outside of any political fray and just are great with business and negotiations and can get a deal done, then why is a deal not being done here to stop this thing?
But isn't it a little ridiculous that their peer countries, other Islamic Arab countries like Egypt, etc., don't want anything to do with them? The Palestinian people, they don't want to. They want to take them. They don't want to. They all end
Very
up,
ridiculous.
They end up as refugees to Europe, which is causing some level of destabilization. And there's certainly a pushback. The resurgence of some right-wing parties in Germany, right-wing anti-immigrant sentiment in the UK, is due to absorbing waves of largely from Syria. But other places, why don't?
Well, I think
why is there no burden on their own?
But I also think that everyone shouldn't have to be a refugee. Like, separating Hamas and understanding that it is a terrorist organization, and understanding that Palestinian people do want to live and exist in the space where they've spent their entire lives and generations, is also a separate thought that you can have, and understand that we should not just be trying to get them to exit so that we can build this, what did President Trump call it, a Riviera in their land?
To this stretch of land for thousands of years, and it's very unhealthy, and this is what comes from it. They should be less attached to the land and more attached to...
But we have to say that on both ends then. We should say that Benjamin Netanyahu should be less attached to trying to...
You're right. If I was starting the state of Israel today, I would do it in Canada and not the Middle East. But nobody consulted me when they formed it in an area where they were surrounded by countries and people who hate them. But
here we are.
Too late to take the Robbie route. Next up, the White House is unveiling what the new TikTok deal with China is going to look like. Stick around for that.